My name is Anicia Supra. Your friend approaches you and tells you that she went to a party and got drunk last night. The two star athletes from the football team raped her. Now the two of you go to the principal and explain what has happened. He brings the guys in and asks them about the events that took place. The guy says nothing happened and you have no proof. They don't face any consequences and they're set free. Now this story is similar to a rape case involving two police officers, Officer Moreno and Officer Mehta of the NYPD. Most of you may agree with me when I say that they should have been found guilty of rape, but for those of you that don't, I ask for you to just listen to what I have to say. I'll explain the events that took place, say what the prosecution should have done differently, and say why the jurors came to the verdict of not guilty. A young lady who had just gotten a job promotion. She had wine for lunch, a half a bottle of champagne before she went out celebrating with her friends. She had X amount of drinks of hard liquor. She got drunk, she passed out, took a cab home. The taxi driver calls the police department to send over two officers to help her get into her apartment. She doesn't remember much events of the night because she's blacked out so many times. But she's remembered Velcro being torn, her pantyhose being slid down, and the officers penetrating her. Now, the officers said there was nothing that happened. Their side of the story is completely different. Officer Moreno and Officer Mehta said they were called to help her escort her to her apartment. After that, the woman confided in Officer Moreno saying her friends were upset with her because she drank so much that night. Now Officer Moreno told her he was a recovering alcoholic, so she confided in him. The two officers left and returned 3 more times that night. Officer Moreno confessed that he falsified a police call just so they can go back to her block. And one of the visits, Officer Mehta was sleeping on the sofa while Officer Moreno spoke to the woman. After they built a rapid, Officer Moreno said he climbed into her bed and cuddled with her. Now, we can all assume what happened there. The prosecution said, according to the article WNYC, that forensic science often fails to turn up evidence after a crime. They said Officer Moreno and the woman both touched a glass, but they could not get any fingerprints. Now, with that, they should have found a way to prove the officers were in her apartment, because they also scanned the couch for any fibers of Officer Mehta's DNA, and they found nothing. They also brought in a toxicology expert who stated that a drunken person doesn't hallucinate, and that all events that happened that night are memories, and that they remember what's happening. It's just foggy. The prosecution also knew she was intoxicated, which knew the jury would want to know if her testimony is valid. They should have made sure that she had a solid testimony by explaining what... I'm sorry, I'm just going to move to the next point. The jury wasn't really convinced because in that article in the New York Times, Richard Schmeddy, who was a jury of the case, said, "None of us believed anything anyone said. We had no proof." Because they had no proof and it was all testimony, they couldn't take the testimony not really serious, but they couldn't see if it was valid. Eric Casciano, another juror, said neither Morano nor the woman were completely convincing. He also stated that their story seemed like they had holes in it, so they don't know if they were telling the truth or not. John Fink, another juror, said, "We found the evidence presented to us in the courtroom did not satisfy the standard of reasonable doubt required to convict the defendants in the major charges of the rape and burglary. What John Fink is saying is that the prosecution did not present the amount of evidence needed in order for them to convict Officer Moreno and Mata. And because the woman's testimony was not presentable because of her drunken state, the jury had no choice but to not convict Officer Moreno and Mata of rape. In conclusion, there are so many things the prosecution could have done differently, like focusing on the toxicology expert and going more into detail how a drunken person does not hallucinate things and doesn't just imagine that they're happening. Had they done that, don't you think the jury would have found Officer Moreno and Mata guilty? Thank you.